Excel has quite a few different ways to format numbers. We're looking at a worksheet called numeric and a workbook called O4 formatting. Quite a few different number types here. First of all, in column B, we see Social Security numbers. By the way, these are randomly generated. I hope we didn't put yours in there. What's wrong with these? Not exactly wrong, but what's a little bit unusual. As we use Social Security numbers, typically we see dashes in there after the first three characters, and then two more characters, and another dash, and then the final four. Rather than typing dashes, the person who put in the data perhaps thought, I'll get to those later. Now, ideally, what you do in a situation like this is format the cells ahead of time. In fact, the entire column in this case. If you right-click a column letter, you can immediately go to Format Cells. And you wouldn't necessarily know where to find this, but on the Number tab, there is a category called Special, and there we see Social Security number. If we click OK, we now see dashes as soon as we make this column adjustment. Double-click the boundary between B and C. Now, the dashes are not truly in the data. Look in the formula bar, you don't see them. If you double-click here to edit, you don't see them. They're in the format. But why type dashes when you don't really need to? It looks like the phone numbers were pursued in the same way. Here too, why type open and close parentheses, a space, and a dash? Simply format these. Now, once again, I would stress, if you're setting up a phone column to put in data, format this ahead of time, or at least after you get in one of the numbers. Here too, we could activate Format Cells with Control-1. It's another way to get there. Off to the right, we'll go to Special, same general location. Phone number, we could double-click it too. That's a little bit faster. And we see what's happening once we readjust the column width. If we're editing here, for example, double-clicking, that 901 should have been a 303. Highlight the data, 303. We're not seeing those symbols. We're not typing them. We press Enter, and yet we see them. Now, two commonly used features for formatting are found on the Home tab in the Number group. Now, this is a salary column. We might want to see dollar signs. Not everybody does, but let's choose dollar sign here after selecting the entire column in this case. Dollar sign. Notice that when we slide over the dollar sign button, it says Accounting Number Format. If we make the column wider, we certainly don't need to, but sometimes we might because there could be some different salary widths in there. Notice what the dollar sign does. It stays on the left side. Nothing wrong with that truly, but sometimes the alignment button here has some impact. Notice how that changes. Looks like it just changed the top cell, but the dollar signs are changing just slightly there. Now, many times if you're using numbers that have 0 pennies in them, as we see here, it would make sense not to display them. So it's not uncommon when you're using dollar signs with certain kinds of numbers to not show the decimals. Decrease them twice. So we see the effect there. And it's important to note, too, that by doing this, we are not changing the content. If, for example, we had values in here that were 75 cents, 80 cents, this particular entry here would read 42,541. Now, it's not really changing the value if we were to do that, but it would change the display. And at certain times, it makes sense not to show the pennies. But don't ever assume that these buttons here that increase or decrease decimals are changing content. It's simply appearance. Over here in column G, we might want to use dollar sign. We could do that. Notice the difference here, and particularly if we make the column wider, we see what's happening here with the display. Now, in both of these columns, it might make sense not to use dollar signs. Salary, perhaps it's obvious they're dollar signs, and maybe here too. So either separately or together, maybe together, we'll highlight both columns and use the comma button. The big difference here will be the absence of the dollar signs. But in other respects, the entries look pretty similar. Let's go back to dollar sign, back to comma. What's the difference? The presence of the dollar sign. So many times for formatting, the comma in the dollar sign button makes sense. If you are using comma here too, maybe we don't want to show the pennies. Do recognize the difference here too, what happens with negatives. And that may not be your choice. In other words, they're in parentheses. This is what accounting format does. That's what comma format does. So either one at a time or together, let's consider some other options here. If you go to the dialog box launcher in the corner here, or if you press Control 1. You'll come into Format Cells, and we've got some additional choices here. Here's Currency. Notice here that Currency gives us the option of making the negatives be either red or red in parentheses. I'm going to choose red in parentheses. Click OK. We see what's happening there. Now, again, pressing Control 1. We've got another choice. We've got number, we've got currency, and we've got accounting. At different times, you might want to choose one or the other. And the problem sometimes is you'll get data from other sources. What if some of the data you're getting uses currency, some is using accounting? Let's use accounting here. Okay, we see the dollar signs. Watch what happens when I use currency. I'll go back by way of the dialog box launcher, use currency, and maybe here I want to use parentheses black. Click OK, but watch the dollar sign. You see how it goes inside the parentheses. Click the dollar sign up here, it goes outside again. Again, what I'm doing here is showing you different formats. This is not designed to confuse you, but to point out their differences. By all means, pick a favorite, and I strongly recommend dollar sign and comma. I think that works for most people. But when you are getting data from other sources, it's not always in the same format as yours, and you'll have to decide one way or another which works best. But at least you do have some options. Do notice that when you selected a column like this and you're using comma format, there is space to the right, and that's to allow for the parentheses if a number is negative. Now over here, by putting a minus in front of this, of course, we don't really have negative salaries, but watch how the commas still line up, and the decimals would too if we had those. So we see the parentheses on the right. That's why there's spacing there. If you use number format, we can go back to the dialog box this way or by way of Control 1. If you use number format, you will not necessarily see that space on the right unless you choose the option that has parentheses. So what if we use this format? That's another option. So again, you'll have to decide which one to use, but do recognize the idea here that we have different kinds of fonts available. And here too, this list to the right, we don't need to see all of it, but I'll make column K wider. We see how the dollar signs are out here. Now, if you don't want them to be on the left side, we can highlight both of these. If you want the dollar sign next to the numbers, well, then we'll use currency format. Once again, we could press Control 1 and use currency. No decimal places. Click OK, and the dollar signs will be next to the number. So lots of different formats here, but we can get to them easily, initially by way of the buttons here available in the number group on the Home tab, but also by way of Control 1, where we see other options available under Format Cells.